Hey, everybody, welcome to AQ's Blog and Grill. We're really excited today to have Kurtis McBride as our guest. Kurtis is the co founder and CEO of Miovision, which is a really interesting, I'm not even going to say startup. It's in its 10th or 12th year now, and it's really making great progress. In terms of a global market, we're going to talk to Kurtis a little bit about that in a moment. Um, Miovision just announced in the past little while that they have received Series C funding, Series 3 funding, uh, and it's an amazing amount of confidence that investors are showing in Miovision. The amount comes into about 120 million Canadian, and that's made up with new investors and some legacy investors. So this is really an interesting story. So welcome, Kurtis.
Thank you.
So, Kurtis, give us a little bit of an outline, if you will, on what Miovision is today, what it is that you guys are doing, and then in a moment or two we'll talk about the future. But what are you guys up to these days?
Yeah, for sure. So I always make reference to the Italian Job. If you remember that scene where they're zipping
Yes.
through and making the lights turn red and green.
Yeah.
Yeah. So based on that, people always assume that intersections are already connected and have sensors and are smart. And while that's true in a small number of cases, most intersections are unconnected, at least unconnected in any sort of modern way that we would think about connectivity. They have limited sensing capabilities. So, and as a consequence, traffic is kind of, if you've ever driven around anywhere, traffic tends to suck.
Yeah.
So our whole approach is trying to bring technologies and business models that have been proven out, in lots of different markets all over the place, and try to bring them to a market that hasn't really gone through the internet revolution yet. It's still stuck in 1985. Lots of serial and analog devices that are used, and we try to come along and bring sensing capability, communications, intelligence that runs in the cloud, and really to try to help make cities more livable, improve congestion, improve safety, just to sort of generally make driving around a lot more fun.
Yeah, and I guess this is also going to affect the carbon footprint of cities to a degree.
Yeah, totally. One of the stats that we've developed and we've been talking a lot about to our federal and provincial partners is that Canada made a bunch of commitments at the Paris Accord to reduce our greenhouse gas footprint, and currently we're on track to miss those targets. If you were to, based on the data sets we have, where we've actually gone in and optimized intersections that were underperforming and causing delays and ultimately causing greenhouse gas emissions. If you were to optimize every intersection in Canada, of which there's about 40,000 of them, it would close that gap by about a third. So
Wow.
a relatively inexpensive investment
Yeah.
to make a huge dent in that number. So obviously that's true on smaller scales when cities implement, but as a national stat, it's pretty compelling as well.
Great. And I mean, that is significant. Now, are cities in North America getting it, or are the Europeans a little ahead of us on how this can improve um, the release of carbon gases?
Yeah, it a lot of it comes down to, you can use our system for a number of different things. I mean, greenhouse gas reduction is certainly one of the things. Some cities are more focused on like pedestrian and cyclist safety. Some are more focused on commuter times and just reducing travel times. So
Right.
what we generally try to do is we go in, and um, depending on the political force of the day, we try to really emphasize the parts of our system that help with that particular aspect. So in Jersey City, for example, when we did a deployment there, the mayor had come in with what's called Vision Zero, which is a platform really focused on trying to reduce road fatalities to zero over time. So the investment that city made was really about safety and trying to understand safety. In Toronto, when we did the deployment there, it was the planning folks that were really trying to understand the impact of some policy changes they've made along King Street to improve transit utilization along King Street corridor. And then in other cases, it's like I said, greenhouse gas or congestion based approach. So yeah, a lot of a lot of our approach is trying to understand what's really the priority for the citizens locally, and then try to align our tools for them around those priorities.
Yeah. Now, so Jersey City is just outside of Manhattan,
Yep.
and what do you think? Is Manhattan ever going to be able to do this?
Yeah, I mean, we have a great relationship with the city of New York. We do through our other product called Scout, which is more of a portable deployed product. We do most of the traffic counts in Manhattan and in New York at large. I mean, they have really complex challenges there. They've done a lot to try to invest in optimization of traffic in Manhattan in particular. The biggest problem they have right now is around double parked cars. So you'll have a UPS
Yes.
truck that'll come in and double park, and it might only be for 60 seconds while they run in and drop the package, but it
Right.
just sends like a shockwave of congestion through Manhattan.
Yeah.
So some of the things we've been talking about with them are more like real time alerting so that they can drive enforcement around double parked cars, or what they call block the box, where you have
Yes.
people that basically park in the middle of the intersection, light changes, no one can move.
Mhm.
Theirs is more around, sort of operationally trying to eliminate the things that cause those shockwaves of congestion, because the network will take 5, 10, 15 minutes to heal from one of those shockwaves.
Right. But if any organization in the world can solve that problem, it is Miovision.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and again, like we're taking business models and technologies that have been proven in lots of other markets, right? So we're not fundamentally inventing a new mousetrap. We're just taking mousetraps that have been proven and applying them. So
Right.
I would say any organization that takes 21st century approaches and 20% uses 21st century technologies, applies in this problem, can solve it. We just happen to be the only ones doing that right now.
Right. It's a great position to be in. So when I've read descriptions about Miovision back when you and I first chatted about 5 years ago, um, it was all about being smart. It was having smart technology for smart cities. Are cities getting smarter?
Yeah, I mean, I never liked the smart city um, definition, because it implies something about what we were
Okay.
before we were smart.
Right.
I think what the opportunity with with the smart city is that whatever you measure will improve. And we've never really been able to measure cities in the ways that ubiquitous wireless networks and Moore's law driving down the cost of sensors and processing,
Right.
ubiquity of cloud, like all of those things have sort of converged, where it used to be that we could instrument the internet and we could get really smart about the data that was available in the internet. But now the technology is getting to the point where you can actually instrument the physical world. And I think we're really just at the beginning of what the smart city uh, can ultimately become.
Right.
And I think there's this once in a generation opportunity to start to measure the things that we care about. So it's things like safety, things like greenhouse gas emissions, all the things that go into livability. And then beyond mobility, there's all sorts of other things like energy consumption and the movement of goods and people, that uh, that I think if we can start to measure them, and then start to build insight tools on them that help us to understand how to improve them, there's an opportunity to optimize lots of different aspects of cities by 20 or 30%.
Wow.
And I think that's the when people talk about smart city, I think it's a bit of a it's almost like a yearning for what that would look like, that they're
Yeah.
hanging on to.
Yeah. It's an aspiration, I guess.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So how many cities, how many communities are currently customers of Miovision?
So we have two different product families. We have the Scout and the Traffic Link. Scout's been around for 10 plus years.
Hmm.
We probably have over 1,500 customers using that in 60 countries, or more than
Wow.
60 countries around the world.
Hmm.
And then we have Traffic Link, which is a newer product, and it has approaching 200 customers. Largely North America. We have one deployment in New Zealand, but largely Canada and the U.S. for now with the Traffic Link product.
Right.
Um, and we have you know low thousands, like two or 3,000 intersections that are running on the traffic link platform right now.
Wow. That's great. So how many people are employed? How many people fit on the Miovision team today?
So we have our headquarters obviously in Kitchener Waterloo, and then we have a sales and support office in Germany in Cologne.
Hmm.
So between those two offices, we have about 175 people full time staff today.
Hmm.
And then over the next 12 months, with the capital raise that you talked about, we're gonna try to add about 100 new people to the team.
Wow, that's uh, that's a lot of investment, and obviously, you and your investors feel that this technology and the business model is going to be um, expanding in almost an exponential way.
Yeah, yeah, I mean that's the market right now. Part of why we raise this money is my experience is it's actually very rare that companies are constrained by capital. They're usually constrained by customer demand, or they're constrained
Hmm.
by just internal processes, market readiness, all that kind of stuff. We for the last 6 or 8 months, we've actually been in the rare circumstance where we actually are constrained by capital. So this capital injection is going to let us sort of catch up to where we're at in terms of the demand
Hmm.
that's coming at us. I talked before about how even though we're in 60 countries with Scout, we've really focused in North America with Traffic Link, and that's not because the traffic is you know only bad in North America. It's bad in all sorts of places. It's more just that we don't have the capacity to keep up with the demand that's coming at us.
Right.
I think the I often use the analogy of a smartphone when I talk about what we do at the intersection. So before the smartphone, if you can remember back to those days, you'd buy a phone, but you'd also buy a Garmin GPS unit, and you'd buy a flashlight and a calculator, maybe like a portable DVD player.
Right.
And depending on what you wanted to do, you'd reach into your bag of hardware and you'd pull out the right device, and you'd do math, or you'd shine light. Um, and then when the smartphone came along, one piece of hardware enabled by software could do all those different things.
Right.
And so our market is very much still in the pre-smartphone age, where every feature function you want to add to an intersection is a new device, new piece of hardware, new capital expense, new installation. You got to roll a bucket truck out there to put it up. And so what we're doing is bringing a smartphone mentality to the intersection, where one piece of hardware enabled by software can do lots of different things.
Hmm.
And I think what we're finding is that once customers, it takes time to kind of wrap your head around that as a customer, because you've been operating a certain way for 25 years. But once you wrap your head around the new paradigm, in the same way that after you bought your first smartphone, you didn't go back out and debate whether you should buy a flip phone again. You
Right.
stuck with smartphones. I think what we're seeing with customers is that as they get organizationally over that sort of paradigm shift, then they're all in and they want to deploy it the citywide. Like, we have nearly ubiquitous coverage now in the city of Detroit. The region of Waterloo just went ahead with a large procurement where we're going to have about 2/3 of the intersections in the region by the end of next year, or the end of this year now. So it's starting to really accelerate, and we're pretty excited to be ahead of the market.
Yeah. So this investment, which is, I guess, led mostly by TELUS,
Yep.
the and they're going to hook up with you guys in terms of the mobility aspect of their product. Is that going to be helpful to Miovision to have this kind of partnership?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's sort of two aspects of the partnership with TELUS. So in the near term, we have a roaming relationship with them. So they provide Canada. They've always provided Canada for us, but we now also have global roaming capability. So that makes it easier for me to go into different countries, because I have one relationship now that can sort of have me on any network in globally, which is
Great.
fantastic. We're also doing some two-way data exchange. We have some interesting data that they want to use, but they also have really interesting data in the AVL space and
Hmm.
some other areas that we're going to be able to leverage. So that's the sort of near term is access to their network, access to some of their data. The long term strategy with them is one of the things that has always bothered my vision is that if we, let's say we went out and we fixed traffic. So we invented a product that could make congestion better, could improve safety in a really meaningful way, in a city, and we knew that if we deployed that globally, we could have massive impact on the mobility space. Um, even if we did that, the way that the refresh rates work for infrastructure, it would take 20 years for the impact of that to actually be felt at scale globally.
Wow.
And this has always bothered us. I'm not known for being patient, and it just seems like we solved the problem. Why do we have to wait 20 years to have it be implemented? So
Right.
we've thought a lot about that problem, and on the things we can control. There's an architecture that makes up an intersection that was created 30, 40 years ago. It's still being installed today. It's analog, serial, large metal boxes filled with air. So we think there's an opportunity to really reduce the capital cost of those. We think there's opportunities to reduce the operating costs, like the electricity consumption, how much manual effort goes into updating the signal timings.
Right.
And we think that when you combine all that, you can reduce the total cost of ownership of an intersection by maybe 70%. The problem is 70% is a lot, but it's not the kind of order of magnitude that would take you from a 20-year refresh cycle to consumer electronics, which is maybe 3 years, right? You need a factor of 7 improvement to keep up with the rate of technological improvement if you want to have that reflected in the mobility experience that drivers have, right?
Right.
So we've been racking our brains for last couple of years trying to figure out how do we got part way there with just being innovative and bringing new ideas to the architecture of an intersection. How do we get the rest of the way? And the more we hung out with Telus and with the telco world, we started to understand that they have a problem that they call 5G, which
Right.
is 5G, unlike 4G and 3G, relies on what are called microcells. So you need a lot more towers than you did with 4G, where you could just put a tower up, broadcast out, and you could build a network. With 5G, you need lots of little cells all through a city to provide the high density network.
Right.
Um, and so the question is, where do you put them? If you put them on private property, well, then you need to do a lot of deals with a lot of landlords in order to get your network up and running.
Yep.
Or you put them on public property, which means you have to navigate the government structures and bureaucracies, practices of fairness in order to get your infrastructure onto their poles or their infrastructure. And so 5G, as it turns out, the business model of 5G is actually really hard to implement. And so our thought was, well, what if we could turn an intersection into a 5G base station? And now all of a sudden you can show up to the city and you can say, not only can I help you fix traffic, which is what you care about, but I can also help you get these 5G networks deployed. And
Wow.
by combining the cost structures and the physical location of the base stations, it allows us to get that refresh rate down to that 3-year time scale, so that mobility can keep up with different technology. So that's the sort of the Hail Mary
Yeah.
that we're making with these folks as well.
But that is Curtis. That's just brilliant. That to me looks like it's going to be this huge win-win-win situation, and you're going to be so well positioned to be in that group on the winning side. So good, fabulous thinking, good anticipation.
Thank
Uh,
you.
yeah. Um, so Curtis, just on the personal side here, you mentioned that you're not known for being patient. I was chatting to someone yesterday, and they said, Curtis, he's so determined, bordering on stubborn.
Hmm.
I think that's kind of a strength, don't you?
I mean, every strength has a shadow side, so you gotta know when
Hmm.
to back off. But I'll give you my take on it. I think most people assume that the world they see around them was always the way that they see it,
Mm.
right? So some might call me stubborn, but I think a different way of looking at it is the world is stubborn. Like,
Ah,
the world doesn't want to change. And even when there's a better way, a faster way, a cheaper way, a safer way, a more
mhm.
efficient way, um, the world resists the change because the world likes things the way that they've always been.
Status
And
quo.
so my job, and I think this is true of all entrepreneurs trying to build a business, is that you have to stand in the truth that your way is right, even in the face of overwhelming evidence against you,
Yes.
or in the face of all of the market signaling that it's not gonna bend. You have to stand in the truth long enough that the
Hmm.
world can sort of bend to your new way of thinking about it. Um, and I think that comes across sometimes as being stubborn, but um, I think that's how change happens.
Yeah.
There's a great quote that I'm sure I'm going to butcher, but it essentially the punchline of it is essentially that it takes the unreasonable man to create change, and
Yes.
um, I think that's sort of the lot of an entrepreneur is you gotta be if you bend to the will of the world, then you won't innovate. And
Right.
but if you stand there long enough and force the world to bend to your will, then you will.
I love it.
You're not always right, so
Yeah.
like that's what I've maybe 15 years of wisdom has sometimes taught me that there eventually comes a time where you have to just accept that either you're wrong or the world's not ready to bend. But yeah, there's
Yeah.
my take on my stubbornness.
Oh,
I'm sure
that's
my
great.
I'm sure my wife would feel differently.
Yeah, and by the way, she isn't the one who said that. Well, that's incredible insight into what makes disruption actually happen. Is that willpower combined with the vision and the stick to itiveness of let's make this happen. And unless somebody has that, they're not going to innovate, as you say.
One of my I noticed you have Steve Jobs on the wall behind you.
Yes.
Um, one of my biggest inspirations is Elon Musk, and
Yes.
one of my favorite uh, sort of speeches or uh, talks that he ever gave. He talks about there's three ways to design. You can design by convention, you can design by analogy, or you can design from first principles.
Hmm.
And essentially the point was most people design from convention. It's always been done this way, so we should do it this way.
Right.
They design by analogy. Well, something was like this, therefore the same will be true in my context, and I'll do it the same way. Or they design by first principles, which is you really go down to the core of like what are you trying to accomplish here. And I find to the point about stubbornness, if you design from first principles, which is kind of his point, is you should always try to design from first principles.
Mhm.
If you design from first principles, the conclusions you come to sometimes are radical, right? They're not conventional, and they don't have an analogy, but they're also grounded in the most fundamental truth, right?
Mhm.
And then so a lot of times once you've kind of got to the point where you don't even necessarily know how you're going to do it, whether it breaks the laws of physics, whether it's economically feasible. All you know is that from first principles, if you can implement it this way, it's going to lead to the successful outcome that you want. Um, so I try to stay sort of grounded in that Elon Musk wisdom.
Yeah, I'm with you there. That guy's a hero, and if somebody's going to change the world, it is going to take that sort of approach. So yeah, good on him. And behind me there is Steve, and then a picture of Woz as well. And what Wozniak to me is the real brilliant innovator because of what he could do with the technology and the humanness of the Apple technology, as opposed to their competitors at the time.
Yep,
They not only thought differently, they did differently,
yep,
and that's got to be done, or things are not going to happen
yep,
with any degree of extra. That everything's got to be reinvented so that there's an extra involved that's meaningful, not just another flavor, but uh, something that is going to mean something and be very beneficial to the customer, whoever that may be. And,
yep.
okay, great. So I guess it was easy getting Miovision started, was it, back in 2004 or five? You haven't had any struggles coming out of you were an engineer coming out of Waterloo. Everything was pretty easy, was it?
Oh yeah, piece of cake.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I always say that it took me the first couple of years of doing Miovision to cure myself of my engineering degree. I mean, I
Good for
think
you.
I mean, Waterloo Engineering is amazing. It was a great experience, set a foundation. And I think you come out of that program, at least the time that I graduated, you came out of that program thinking that the building great technology, great user experiences, that was the hard part. That was if you could do that, then the rest of it would sort of take care of itself. And I remember one of my very first sales calls. I phoned. a guy in Toronto, and I started pitching our product, and I started talking about how it had a SQL database in the back end, which meant it could, was fast. It could retrieve his traffic data records, great,
Yeah.
and a lot of technical jargon. And he cut me off, and he's like, "Listen, I don't have a clue what you're saying, but you sound really passionate about it. So why don't you phone me back when you figure out how to talk to guys like me, and I'm happy to take your call." And it was a really impactful conversation,
Hmm.
because it made me really step back and think about, like, I gotta put this in the context of my customer, what they care
Right.
about, how does it help them, achieve their goals,
Yep.
and sort of, I think that was a light bulb moment, and there's been lots of those along the way. Every new scale in a company creates new challenges. Things you were doing last week that worked now all of a sudden stop working.
Hmm.
The biggest one for us has probably been, how do you scale culture? Like, how do when you're 12 people,
Huge.
culture is the average personality in the room.
Hmm.
When you're 200 people, you have to be a lot more intentional and deliberate and systematic about it.
Hmm.
So so yeah, every day is a new challenge. It's one of the things I love about my job, is that I come in the morning, and get to work on, everything ranging from organizational dynamics to marketing to technology to
Hmm.
finance.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a every day's a new day. I always say I never stop being a co-op student.
Yeah, but you're getting your assignments now from you as
Yeah,
opposed. Yeah.
or my customers, or my employees,
Yes.
or my yeah, um, yeah. I mean, we try to. I mean, one of the things about our culture is we try to say it's flat is would not be an accurate
Hmm.
metaphor, but we try to organize around the objective, right? Trying to organize around the goal. So who's the best person to lead in that moment,
Right.
and build teams dynamically to achieve those outcomes. And so sometimes that means I get to lead, but other times I'm a contributor on a team,
Yeah.
and I get to follow, right? And
Yep.
I think that's really, like, one of the things that we've tried really hard to keep as we've grown. And every scale, you have to reinvent how you do it, but we've tried to keep this sort of cellular approach to building the organization as much as we can as we've grown.
Yeah, I think that's a tremendous intention, and from what I hear, you guys are actually behaving that way, and that's going to be one of the keys to any organization success in the future, especially now when talent is looking for that kind of organization. I don't think talent is looking for the pyramid so much, the organizational chart that looks like a pyramid. They bury people in those things.
Yeah.
So the new fabulous talent wants to know that they're contributing, they're working with other really smart people, and no one's getting too siloed
Yep.
in departments, etc. So
Yep.
that's going to be great for Miovision and your team.
I think a
So.
lot of I think a lot of
Mhm.
companies organize around uh, efficiency and or control,
Yeah.
and I think that's sort of the traditional
Hmm.
traditional organizational model.
Yep.
We try to organize around velocity and innovation,
Great.
and which sometimes feels like you're not always in control. Things are not
Right.
always as efficient as they could be.
Yeah.
But I think in this world where Moore's law is driving exponential improvements in all sorts of things, technologically and in business models, you have to go fast in order to compete.
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah.
cultures, I think, are our number one competitive advantage.
Yeah. There you go. Um, Tell me a little bit, if you can, about Catalyst Capital. This is something that you've just recently set up,
Yep.
uh, and I think is it Amy French? That's
Yeah, Amber French.
Amber. Sorry,
Yep.
Amber French, and she's working with you on that. Why was this started, and what are you going to do with it?
Yeah. So all the while that I was, coming up in the early days of my vision, I was mentored. I mean, I still do lots of uh, mentoring, but mentored by people who always used to talk about serial entrepreneurship, right? So this was
Mhm.
the idea that you could build one and you could exit it, and then you take a break and you build another one, and on and on. And it was always quite I was always quite interested in this idea of serial entrepreneurship. But what I found was that, you know, I'm not in any hurry to not be doing Miovision. Like there's still like some really exciting growth opportunities ahead of us. So rather than giving up on the idea that you get to do multiple things, I said, well, why don't I just be a parallel entrepreneur? That seems like an idea. So
Yeah.
things like Catalyst 137 was a foray into real estate. I figured if I was only ever going to do one, you might as well pick a 500,000 square feet because it's do something
Yes.
do something fun with it. Um, and I have a few other. I have a small software company that I helped start called
Hmm.
Meadow. And so, but what I was finding was that, well, you have I had figured out how to spend a couple hours a week uh, taking a vision, building a team around it, and sort of being stubborn, keeping them in the moment, keeping them in the vision, focused on it. Raising capital for those ideas takes time,
Hmm.
and so I either had to slow down on the parallel entrepreneurship front, or I had to figure out how to solve the capital raising part of it. And
Right.
so I figured, well, why not just build another business that focuses on raising capital,
Yeah.
and it can help the projects that I have around me, but it can also maybe help fill a hole in the community more generally. So Amber and I started Catalyst Capital just under a year ago. It was March of last year.
Hmm.
We've done two different deals. So we've done we called SPV, special purpose vehicles. So basically project-based financing. So we find something that's interesting and we raise capital around it.
Right.
So one of the ones that construction is starting shortly and will be open by July is called Catalyst Commons. So this is like be a 60,000 square foot co-working space in Catalyst 137. So
Ah.
focused on that time between you graduate from the incubators, you're out of the accelerator center, out of Communitech. Where do you go now? Instead of going to sign a 5-year lease and having to move in the year, like I did, and like most of my contemporaries did, the
Right.
idea is let's build that sort of you know you got out of your parents' house, but now you get to go to university dorm for a couple of years before you get
Right.
a mortgage and all that good stuff.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, that's Catalyst Capital is just sort of allows me to flex some of my creativity that I have outside of my vision, and then over time we're gonna try to stand up a proper fund and help fill the hole in the community. Just like the garage guys did years ago,
Yeah.
proved we
From
could do it. So
yeah, yeah. The guys from
Vidyard and
Vidyard
Bufferbox.
and
Yeah,
Bufferbox. Yeah,
yeah,
Mike Macaulay.
yeah.
Yeah, it's that in itself is a great idea. And what you are doing now with Catalyst Capital and Catalyst 137, I mean, is really commendable. I was over. Oh, well, you and I bumped into each other about 2 weeks ago, um, and I was lost in there looking for one particular office, but it was great because the vibe, the energy, uh, is just so positive. And I've worked at Communitech as an entrepreneur in residence and the Accelerator Center. Um, you guys have got something going on there that is coming up through the floor, and it is that positive energy, and frankly, a collective culture. So congratulations. I'm really excited for you.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, that was I'm glad to hear you say that. That was the vision of this place was
Mhm.
let's build a place where companies of different sizes and shapes. We have big public companies and we have small startups can come and be, but also where the community can come in. Like we built there's a 6,500 square foot event space right in the front
Yes.
lobby when you come in, and we
Hmm.
do probably 2 or 3 events a week in there. And some of them are tech events, but like some of them are you know Canadian Mental Health did an event here.
Yep.
We've had the hospital AGM's been here. There's been art shows here. So I would try to bring the community and some of the like culture aspects of the community in and collide them with tech.
Yes.
There's a full service restaurant, so people can come bring their families and have dinner and yeah,
Mhm.
it's been really interesting to sort of see it. It's amazing when you just give space away for free that it has an effect of drawing in um, all the right kinds of things. So I remember not so long ago sitting there listening to Chantal Kreviazuk and Rain Maida
Yes.
play their duets and thinking this is bizarre. These are my childhood musical
Yeah.
heroes sitting in a building, playing in exactly the way we kind of envisioned that it could happen. So it's been
Wow.
pretty exciting to see this place turn from a warehouse into what it became.
And it was aware that had to be more work than you had even anticipated. That
Well,
place was a dump.
yeah, I mean, someone 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 who I consider a mentor once told me that ignorance was an entrepreneur's best asset. And I think I'd never even finished a basement when we took this on,
Yeah,
so didn't really know sort of what. I think if I had known what it was going to be involved, then would have given me second pause. But
yeah,
I figured like how hard can it be? Like it's
yeah. This is really where I think the DNA of an entrepreneur comes out, and maybe it has to do with ignorance, and maybe it has to do with, um, hey, let's give it a try,
yeah.
and
What's the
yeah,
worst that can happen?
what's the
My
worst
my
that can
my
happen?
big thing too is like on and Catalyst 137 is a great example of this. Is like you should, as an entrepreneur, you should always try to be the dumbest person on your team.
Yes,
Um,
yeah,
and and I think like with Catalyst, I was really fortunate to bring in partners who had done
yep,
this before and who knew
hmm
kind of what they were getting themselves into. And that made the vision possible to
yeah,
manifest. So yeah,
yeah.
so I really try to take that. Like I always say I'm good at building brand visions and filling bank accounts up, and then beyond that, I got to let other people step in and make it real.
Wow. Well, Curtis, you're a modern day hero to me, and I'm sure to a lot of other people who share that entrepreneurial DNA. That you're making it happen, and that's the way it should be. And you, I think, I know, I have total confidence that you're going to continue to create the things that success looks like. So there's no stopping Curtis McBride.
Well, you're only as good as your last one, so hopefully that
Well,
continues to be true.
well, that is true too.
When
Well, my
Elon Musk's first failure, people will say, "See, I told you he was crazy."
yeah, yeah,
I appreciate that, and I mean, I'm really fortunate to be in this community. Like there's a real culture that
yes,
allows people who are a little bit crazy to take
yep.
chances, and that's what the community's been built on. So it's
Waterloo Region.
if I'm doing well, it's because I'm standing on the shoulder of the giants that came before me.
There you go. Curtis, thanks very much for spending some time with us today. This is Curtis McBride. He is the co founder and CEO of Miovision, which is based here in Waterloo, Ontario, Canada, but also they have an office in Cologne, Germany. They are expanding with purpose, and that's always key to any sustained success is they're doing it for the right reasons. And I will personally guarantee to everyone listening that Mile in 10 years will be still the leader, not only in their category, but they'll be well respected and well regarded as a culture and as an organization. So, Curtis, thank you. Keep being Curtis and keep doing great things. And thanks for joining us here on AQ's Blog and Grill.
Thank you.
AQ's Blog and Grill.